He lived next door for 10 years. But no one knew what was hidden in his basement. 10 years. That's how long he lived next door. A quiet man named Paul Matheson. Always polite. Always at home before dark. Always behind closed doors. He never took vacations. Never hosted neighborhood barbecues. He drove a modest sedan. Kept his yard tidy. Never drew attention. Folks whispered, he works nights. Or he's a private investor. But nobody was sure. Neighbors exchanged smiles and hellos. But no one knew him. No one knew he was sitting on a secret that would shake this entire community. One rainy Tuesday evening, the power flickered off town-wide. In the darkness, sirens wailed close. A deep bass engine idled outside Mother's windows. It was the county sheriff, utility crews, block-long floodlights. They showed up at Paul's front door. A team in hazmat suits. A trunk full of tools and plastic containers. They asked politely, but firmly, to speak with him. He didn't answer. They knocked again. No answer. They went in. What they found in the basement stopped everything. They discovered locked steel vaults. Hundreds of sealed boxes. Strange stains on the concrete. Beneath a carpeted floor. A trapdoor. The camera crews haven't revealed everything yet. But what they filmed behind that door changed lives. If you're just joining in, drop your location in the comment section. We're tracking how far this story spreads. This is real. This is raw. And what you're about to hear is not for the faint-hearted. When the officers opened the trapdoor in Paul Matheson's basement, the air shifted. It wasn't just musty, it was wrong. There were no stairs. Just a rusty metal ladder descending into silence. They climbed down slowly, one after the other. The space beneath the house was larger than anyone imagined, far bigger than the visible foundation. A cold, wide room carved into the earth. Soundproofed, lined with concrete. Covered with decades of dust, but undisturbed in a terrifying way. And then, they saw it. A small desk. A flickering overhead bulb. A notebook. A video camera, still warm. On the wall, there were photos. Tens of them. Black and white. Some Polaroids. Some yellowed by time. All faces. All unfamiliar. Until one investigator whispered, That's Lisa Doyle. She went missing in 1999. And then another. Wait. This one. This was on the news 2 years ago. The officers froze. They weren't looking at random faces. These were missing persons. Disappeared. Forgotten by headlines. Presumed dead or run away. But here, preserved. Cataloged. Watched. Paul hadn't just been collecting photos. He had monitored these people. Some were from other states. Some lived just miles away. Each photo was numbered. And each number matched a label on one of the sealed metal boxes upstairs. Suddenly, it all clicked. The boxes weren't just documents. As Paul had claimed to a neighbor years ago, they were trophies, evidence, possibly worse. But the horror wasn't over. As the officers moved deeper into the chamber, they noticed something strange, a faint humming sound. Like static. It came from behind a reinforced wall. There was a narrow door. No handle. No keyhole. A steel panel sat next to it, blinking red. It was a biometric scanner. He had sealed it from the inside. Without Paul present, there was no way in. But they had one option left, a backup power line. And when they fed the juice into the panel, the light turned green. The door slid open. Inside, nothing could prepare them for what they saw. A mattress, chains, a bucket, a tiny screen playing a looping video. The footage? One of the missing women, still alive. What happened next would turn Paul's name into a nationwide headline. When that steel door hissed open, the officers' bodies tensed. The cold that met them was unnatural, not just in temperature, but in presence. A stillness that screamed. The small room inside was about 8 by 10 feet. A thin, stained mattress lay on the floor. Heavy-duty chains were bolted into the wall, with cuffs at the end, cuffs that had been used recently. And then, the screen. A little CRT monitor from the early 2000s. Cracked at the corner, but still running, looping the same footage. A woman. Thin, pale, eyes wide open but deadened. She sat on the same mattress, in the same room. The timestamp blinked. Yesterday. The officers didn't speak. They didn't breathe. They scoured the room. No trace of her now. No personal belongings. Just that haunting footage. They checked the bucket. It still held water. The mattress was still warm. Whoever she was, she'd been there. And she'd just been moved. And now, Paul was missing. As the news broke, the neighborhood that once felt so safe turned into a war zone of fear. Helicopters hovered. Police cars lined the street. Neighbors whispered, stared, blamed themselves. He helped my son fix his bike last year. I waved at him every morning. He once helped me carry groceries. How could no one have known? 10 years. 10 years of polite smiles, harmless chats, trash bins taken out together. But Paul had been hiding monsters. And he might not have been working alone. Investigators recovered 23 photos. Only 11 of the people were confirmed missing. The rest? Unknown. But what shocked everyone the most was photo number 18. It was taken just months ago. The girl in it was smiling, holding a teddy bear, a school ID clipped to her shirt. She was from that very neighborhood. Her name was Tessa Harper. She was 9, and no one even knew she was gone. They rushed to her house. The door was open. Her mother was on the kitchen floor, unconscious, bruised. An empty syringe on the counter. Paul had taken her hours ago, and no one saw a thing. The search was now a rescue. But time was ticking, and Paul was nowhere to be found. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Comment below where you're watching from. The search for Paul had become a citywide manhunt. The entire neighborhood, once quiet and unsuspecting, was now crawling with FBI agents, helicopters, canines. Tessa Harper, only 9 years old, had vanished without a sound. And the last time anyone saw her, she was smiling up at Paul, handing him a plate of cookies, because he was the nice man next door. The entire country was watching. News vans lined the street. Cameras pointed at the cracked driveway, the yellow tape around Paul's front porch, the locked basement door that was now wide open. But Paul was gone, and with him, a child. Law enforcement issued a nationwide bolo. Border agents were alerted, airports on high alert. But it didn't take long for the first tip to come in. A motel clerk in northern Ohio recognized Paul from the news. Said he'd checked in under the name George Ellison, with a little girl in a pink hoodie. She didn't speak. She didn't even cry. Just followed him like she was programmed. By the time police got there, the room was empty. But what they found was even worse. Under the motel bed, they discovered a manila envelope. Inside it, a USB drive, labeled, "For them." What was on it made 2 officers walk out and throw up. Dozens of clips, some just a few seconds long, others several minutes. Footage from the basement. Different girls, different dates, some tied up, some unconscious, all terrified. But at the end of the footage, a video of Paul, talking directly to the camera, calm, unblinking. "If you're watching this," he said, "then I've already made it to the next stop. Don't bother chasing me. You won't find me unless I want you to." Then he smiled, just a slow, unnatural smirk. "But here's the twist," he said. "It wasn't just me. You've talked to them. You've bought from them. You've even elected some of them. I'm just the beginning." Then the screen went black. The authorities now realized this wasn't just a kidnapping. This was part of a network, and Paul had just blown it wide open. After the FBI analyzed the footage, they started cross-referencing the children's faces with missing persons databases. 3 of the girls had been reported missing, 1 from Arizona, 1 from Michigan, and 1 from Virginia, all under the age of 11. All disappeared under eerily similar circumstances, broad daylight. No signs of struggle, and in each case, neighbors mentioned a quiet man who had recently moved in. But none of those neighbors ever got a name, only a face. And when they were shown Paul's picture, each one said the same thing. Yes, that's him. Paul had been living under at least 5 different aliases, each time in a different state, always in a rental, always with cash, no social media, no digital footprint, and always with a basement. The agents realized they weren't looking for just one crime scene. They were tracking a map of horror. In one house in Virginia, hidden behind a false wall in the basement, they found a child's shoe, pink, torn, bloodstained. In Michigan, an old farmhouse Paul once rented revealed a collection of Polaroid photos buried beneath floorboards. In Arizona, an RV parked behind the property yielded human hair sealed in jars, each labeled with initials and dates. Every discovery pointed to one chilling truth. Paul wasn't just a predator. He was documenting everything, archiving it, and maybe sharing it. But why? Why leave behind evidence so detailed, so incriminating? Unless you wanted to be caught? That's when cybercrime agents dug into the metadata of the videos. And what they found made everyone in the room go silent. Each file had been downloaded, re-uploaded, and shared hundreds of times. Through encrypted networks, Paul had been live streaming, to subscribers, and they were paying for it. A live chat feed recovered from the dark web showed usernames cheering him on, suggesting new games to play, betting on how long a child would stay quiet. Dozens of viewers, possibly hundreds, and none of them used real names. This wasn't just a sick man's secret. It was an industry. And Paul, he was just one supplier. But the worst part? The usernames. One of them matched an email address used by a sitting judge. Another was linked to an IP address inside a prestigious university. One was even traced to a law enforcement server, encrypted, but not completely clean. That meant someone inside the system was watching, and possibly protecting him. So the question wasn't just, where is Paul? It became, who's helping him? The FBI task force expanded overnight. They brought in agents from cybercrime, child trafficking, behavioral analysis, even internal affairs. Because the moment it became clear that someone from inside the system might have been watching those live streams, it wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about exposure. The files recovered from Paul's home revealed a hard truth. He hadn't just been broadcasting. He'd been building a network, encrypted chats, secret forums. He wasn't the leader. He was just one node in something much bigger. A web, a ring, the kind you hear about in horror documentaries, then convince yourself can't possibly be real. But this one was. And it was global. The FBI worked quietly. They didn't want to tip off other members of the network. So they ran silent operations. No press, no raids, just quiet surveillance, arrests, and data sweeps. Within 2 weeks, 14 more people were taken in across 5 different states. Each one had something in common. They were all respectable. A pediatric nurse, a school board member, a church youth leader, a retired police captain. All of them were subscribers. Some of them had even commented during the streams. Make her cry. Try the shock collar again. More blood this time. It made the agents sick. But none of them could forget what still mattered most. Where was Paul? Interpol joined in. The Canadian and UK authorities launched parallel investigations. But Paul was gone. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. Until, one night, an anonymous package showed up at the FBI field office in New York. No return address. No fingerprints. Just a flash drive. And a sticky note. It said, "You're looking in the wrong country." The drive contained just one video. Grainy. Black and white. No timestamp. But in the background, muffled crying. And Paul's voice. Clear. Calm. He said, "I didn't leave. I just moved deeper." Then he looked directly into the camera and smiled. Then the feed went dark. Just black. For 15 minutes. Until a single line of text appeared. "Catch me before I start again." That night, the FBI held an emergency meeting. The behavioral analysis unit concluded something terrifying. Paul wanted to be found. Not because he wanted to stop, but because the chase excited him. Every article, every news leak, every time someone whispered his name in fear, he got stronger, more confident, and worse, more followers. Because while the authorities were scrambling to trace him, on the dark web, a new page went live. Basement King Reborn, with a countdown timer, 48 hours. And under it, a message, live in 2 days. Don't miss it. Because Paul wasn't just a criminal. He was a performance. A shadow actor playing normal while building horror beneath the surface. And now, he was planning to go live again. The countdown on the Basement King Reborn site hit 43 hours. The FBI scrambled into crisis mode. They didn't just need to find him. They needed to stop him. Fast. The digital team traced the site's code. It bounced between 42 countries. Iran, Russia, Romania, then into a secure darknet host that had never been cracked before. It was like Paul had become a ghost with fingerprints all over the world. But no face, no trail, only his voice, echoing in their minds. "I didn't leave. I just moved deeper." Meanwhile, the neighborhood where it all started, Paul Street, was drowning in anxiety. People were installing cameras. Some were selling their homes. Others couldn't sleep. One of them was Jenna. Remember Jenna? The 9-year-old girl who almost got taken? She was 19 now. She'd grown into a fierce, intelligent young woman. But she'd never stopped living in fear. She'd been diagnosed with PTSD. She didn't like basements. She didn't like older men who smiled too much. And she never opened the blinds in her room. But when she saw the news, that Paul was still alive, that he might hurt someone again, something changed in her. She decided to help the FBI. At first, they said no. She was a civilian, too close to the case, too traumatized. But she showed them something. Something she'd never told anyone. A notebook, filled with scribbles, drawings, and floor plans. Of Paul's house, the vents, the locks, the entry points, and a name. James. She said, Paul wasn't working alone. I used to hear him whisper that name through the wall at night. James, don't let her scream. James, lock the top latch. The FBI froze. And then, the breakthrough came. A grainy traffic cam photo, taken 14 days after Paul disappeared. At a truck stop in Arizona. A man in a baseball cap, but standing next to him. A taller man, covered in tattoos, holding a child's backpack. Facial recognition software ran overnight. It pinged one result. James Holloway, former Army, dishonorably discharged. Convicted in 2006 of child endangerment. Charges later dropped. Last known address, Boise, Idaho. But that house had been abandoned for 8 years. It got worse. There were 9 missing children within a 50-mile radius of that location, all under the age of 12, all missing in the last 3 years. None ever found. The agents realized. Paul was the showman. But James was the monster behind the curtain. And the countdown was now down to 14 hours. The clock was ticking. 13 hours. 47 minutes. And every passing second felt like a scream no one could hear. Paul had vanished without a trace. But James was now the center of the investigation. He was off-grid. No bank transactions. No phone signals. No social media. He had learned from Paul. Or worse, Paul had learned from him. And yet, the agents had one clue. A pattern buried inside the website code for the Basement King Reborn stream. A countdown, yes. But hidden within that countdown was another layer of encryption. It wasn't just ticking toward a live stream. It was counting down to a drop point. Boise, the very town where James had once lived. The agents descended on Boise with a quiet urgency. Unmarked vans, satellite drones, a heat-mapping team stationed miles away. They canvassed every abandoned building near the coordinates. But it wasn't until they reached a crumbling warehouse, once a potato storage facility, that things changed. The dogs went wild. They caught a scent, a faint trace of ammonia, blood, and human sweat. Inside, the warehouse was empty, at least at first glance. Dust, rusted crates, dead silence. But in the far left corner, a staircase, and that staircase led down. The basement was humid, dark, and silent. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was held in place, like someone had told it not to move. The walls were soundproofed. The lights were red. And in the center, a screen. The FBI team activated body cams. They approached slowly, weapons drawn. On the screen was a video feed. It showed a little girl, in a room with no windows. She was clutching a teddy bear, eyes wide, not crying, just waiting. She had a name tag taped to her chest. It said #009, Olivia. The FBI agents held their breath. One of them whispered, "This isn't a live stream." Another said, "Then what is it?" A voice crackled from the speaker beside the screen. Familiar, slow, measured. "You're almost there, but not quite. She's safe for now, unless time runs out." Then the screen went black. Back at the command center, Jenna was monitoring everything. She stared at the image of the girl burned into the screen. Olivia looked 7. And something about her teddy bear. Jenna gasped, "That's my bear." She pulled out a photo. She was 5, smiling, holding the same bear. She whispered, "That's me. That's what he used to trick her." She stood up. "I want in." The FBI hesitated. She said it again, louder. "I want in." Because for Jenna, this wasn't just about justice anymore. This was personal. Meanwhile, Paul's countdown was still ticking. 10 hours. 11 minutes. And now, he had posted a message. "You all looked away when it mattered. So now, you will look. And you will remember." Then another video dropped. But this time, it wasn't a child. It was a camera from the inside, facing someone bound. Not a victim, an accomplice. James, bruised, bleeding, begging. And Paul's voice again. "You thought I needed you, James. But you were just a means. Now it's your turn to wait in the dark." The FBI analysts froze. Paul had turned on James, which meant Paul was acting alone, but more dangerous than ever. And the new question wasn't who he would hurt. It was how many. The team had less than 10 hours left, and no one knew where Olivia was. No one except Paul. The final image on the screen was a clock. Still ticking, still mocking, still whispering in the dark. You watched me for 10 years, and still didn't see me. The room went quiet. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that hums with invisible tension. The kind that makes your heart pound in your ears. The kind that tells you something is coming. Paul had James. Bound. Terrified. Exposed. The same James who'd once thought he was the puppeteer, now tangled in Paul's strings. Jenna stared at the countdown. 9 hours. 52 minutes. Paul was always 10 steps ahead, but he had left one thread hanging. Her. She wasn't a child anymore. She wasn't silent anymore. And if Paul had used her childhood, her bear, her face, her memories, then maybe she could use his memories too. She asked to go back to the original house. Back to the place Paul had lived. That quiet beige house next door, where the lawn was always trimmed and the mailbox never overflowed. No one had been inside in years. The place had been sealed after his arrest. But Jenna had a hunch. Not everything had been found. Not everything had been seen. The key still hung under the third brick. He hadn't even changed it. Because Paul believed he was untouchable, invisible. Inside, the house was exactly as she remembered it. Sterile, soulless, like someone pretending to be normal. Plastic furniture, no family photos, no clutter, just silence. She walked to the kitchen, opened the cabinet beneath the sink, pulled out a small, rusted box, the one Paul had given her when she was 6. Inside were puzzle pieces, from a jigsaw they'd never finished. She ran her hand over the lid, and then she saw it, carved into the wood, so faint you'd miss it. I see you. Her heart froze. It wasn't just a childhood game. He had been watching her, always. Even when she'd moved schools. Even after he'd been arrested. She looked at the puzzle again, turned over one piece. On the back was a code. V923, Hollow Pines. Jenna's eyes widened. Hollow Pines was a burned-out retreat in the hills. Abandoned since 2007. No power. No cell service. No visitors. She called the agents. We need to go now. Within the hour, 2 helicopters cut through the sky. Down below, Hollow Pines sat like a ghost waiting to be remembered. The cabins were covered in ivy and ash. But one stood cleaner than the rest. Swept. Recently used. Jenna pushed open the door. The stench of bleach hit first. Then silence. And in that silence, a sound. A soft, high-pitched whimper. They followed it. Down a trapdoor. Into another basement. Always the basement. This one had pink wallpaper. Drawings taped to the wall. A small bed. A bowl of cereal, half-eaten. And there, in the corner, Olivia. She was asleep. Peaceful. Like nothing had happened. But her fingers gripped the bear tightly. Too tightly. She opened her eyes. Saw Jenna. And whispered, "Mom." Jenna fell to her knees. Held her. Cried. Even though Olivia wasn't hers. She could have been. She was her. A copy. A warning. A second chance. But just as the agents celebrated, the screen on the far wall blinked to life. Paul again. "You're early," he said. But not done. And then, the video changed. Another child. This one a boy. Same room. Same setup. And a new name on the tag. Number 010, Marcus. The team froze. Jenna stood. Her face hardening. Paul had never stopped. And Olivia wasn't the last. The countdown continued. 8 hours. 01 minute. Paul's voice returned. "You think you've won. But this isn't about one. It's about what you didn't see. What no one ever sees. What lives in basements. And behind eyes that smile." Jenna looked straight at the screen. She didn't flinch. "You're slipping, Paul," she said quietly. "You're not invisible anymore. At this point, Marcus needs saving. Paul is unraveling. And Jenna is becoming what Paul fears most. A survivor who fights back. They carried Olivia out first. Wrapped in blankets. Eyes wide. But safe. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just held on to that bear. Like it was stitched with protection. Jenna stood outside the cabin, watching the girl disappear into the waiting van. She wanted to follow. Hold her. Tell her that monsters can be beaten. But there was no time. Because now, they had a name. Marcus. And another countdown. Still ticking. Still daring them to move faster. Back at HQ, the screens lit up with maps, names, timestamps. Paul had been planning this for years. Locations scrawled on envelopes. Coordinates scribbled on puzzle pieces. Each child had a number. A pattern. Not just trophies. Experiments. Psychological mirrors. Each one patterned after a different version of Jenna. The long hair. The drawings. The stories. The fear. Paul wasn't just obsessed. He was replicating every detail, every emotion, every response. It was like he was trying to build the perfect puppet, so he could control what he couldn't before. His mistake? He thought Jenna would run. He never expected her to fight. Jenna asked to speak to Paul again. They patched in a video feed. His face flickered onto the screen. Calm, amused. "Ah, the puppet found her strings," he said. "Tell me, Jenna, do you still draw with your left hand when you're scared?" She didn't blink. "You're slipping," she replied. "Olivia's safe. We know about Marcus. We will find him. And when we do, I'll be the one to look you in the eyes and say, 'You lost.'" Paul leaned in, eyes sparkling. "But have I?" Then the screen went black. The team worked through the night, cross-referencing patterns, shipping logs, receipts. One clue stood out: an abandoned petting zoo outside Nashville. Bought in cash, never reopened. Just another place with a locked basement. Jenna and 2 agents flew out at dawn. The air was thick with silence. Fences wrapped in barbed wire. Closed for maintenance, signs sun-faded and crooked. They moved quickly, guns drawn, hearts pounding. Inside the barn, everything was still. Hay scattered, rust on the stalls. Then a faint noise. Clink, clink, like a chain moving. They found the trapdoor beneath a pile of moldy feed. Same make, same design. Paul liked order. He liked repetition. They pried it open. Flashlights cutting through darkness. And there, chained to the wall, a boy, small, maybe 9, pale, terrified. He looked up, blinking through tears. "Are you the angel?" he whispered. Jenna knelt beside him. "No, sweetheart, but I'm here to get you out." The team cut the chains, lifted him out, wrapped him in warmth. Another child saved. Another life Paul didn't get to ruin. But then they saw it. On the wall behind where Marcus had been kept. More drawings. Dozens. Not by the boy. By Paul. Each one detailed. Precise. Faces. Names. A timeline. The last image showed a clock. Midnight. And beside it, Jenna. Tied. Eyes closed. The message beneath it chilled her to the bone. The final act begins at home. Paul wasn't done. He was circling back. To where it all started. To Jenna's mother. To the place he'd first watched her. Back. To the neighborhood. They rushed home. Jenna's house. Where her mother still lived. Where it all began. But the house was empty. The door wide open. On the table, a note. Written in the same handwriting Paul used in her childhood letters. "Let's finish our game." The basement door creaked open. Jenna didn't speak at first. She just stared at him. The man who had haunted her childhood. Now flesh and blood before her. Calm, seated. Like an old friend waiting to reminisce. Paul gestured to the chair across from him. "I kept it warm for you." Her mother let out a weak cry, muffled by the cloth gag between her lips. Jenna didn't move. "Let her go," she said. Voice flat, almost cold. Paul smiled softly. "Oh, Jenna, you know this isn't about her anymore. This is about you and me. It always has been." She could see the scars now. Faint, running up his neck. Disappearing beneath his collar. Self-inflicted or earned. She couldn't tell. But they painted the picture. Of a man who had been broken. Long before the world labeled him a monster. "You used to sing outside your window, remember?" he said, eyes distant. "I would sit in my basement, just under the vent, and listen. You sounded like hope." Jenna's hands trembled, but she didn't show it. She needed time, just enough for the backup to arrive. He stood up, walked over to her mother, untied the gag, but kept the ropes around her wrists and ankles. "She'll be quiet," he said. "I've already told her the ending. She understands now." Her mother coughed, weakly. "Don't listen to him, Jenna. He's sick." Paul turned sharply. "I'm not sick. I was made. By people like you. People who pretend the past doesn't exist." Jenna saw the storm inside him then. A boy never comforted. A young man never understood. And a grown man, who let pain ferment until it turned into obsession. "You moved on," he said. "You all did. But I was still there. Next door. Watching. Waiting. Hoping you'd look at me. And remember." Her mind flashed back to that summer. She was only 12. The screams. The cellar door slammed shut. Her mother grabbing her. Telling her not to ask questions. Not to look back. They moved shortly after. But Paul never forgot. She spoke finally. "I remember." His eyes widened. "You do?" Jenna nodded slowly. "That night. Your mother." She ran into the street, begging for help. "My mom told me not to go out. Said it was a family matter." The next morning, your house was quiet. Paul blinked. No one came. No one called. She was screaming for hours. Jenna swallowed the lump in her throat. I know. We failed you. The room grew still. A long silence. Paul's voice cracked. I waited for someone to save me. I'm sorry, Jenna whispered. I truly am. He stared at her. Something in his face. Relief? Grief? Letting go? But it was brief. Fleeting. Then, the old mask returned. No one apologizes to the forgotten, he muttered. They only remember when it's too late. A loud snap echoed from outside. Branches. Footsteps. Back up. Paul heard it too. He stepped back. Looked around. Panicked. No, he whispered. They can't take this moment from me. Not after all these years. He pulled a small device from his pocket. Detonator. Jenna's eyes widened. No. Paul, don't do this. Please. It's not too late. We can help you. He shook his head slowly. Help is a myth. People don't help. They bury. And forget. Sirens in the distance. Shouts. Flashing lights against the window panes. Paul looked at Jenna one last time. You remember me now? That's all I ever wanted. But before he could press the button, a single shot rang out. He fell. Hard. The detonator slid across the floor. Unpressed. Officers stormed in. Guns raised. Jenna rushed to her mother, cutting the ropes with shaking hands. Paul lay still, a single wound in his shoulder. Alive, but unconscious. The medic team rushed in. She clung to her mother, heart racing, tears burning her eyes. Outside the cabin, snow continued to fall. Cold, silent, indifferent, just like the years they'd spent pretending the boy next door had never existed. But karma doesn't forget, and identity always finds its way back. They wheeled Paul out on a stretcher, unconscious, barely breathing, but alive. The officer in charge looked at Jenna. You're lucky. If we'd been a minute late, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Inside the cabin, everything felt frozen in time, like the air itself hadn't moved since. The last scream echoed through the basement walls. Jenna stood in the doorway, watching the flickering shadows on the ground. They danced like ghosts. Old memories stirred. Whispers of a neighborhood that never asked questions, and a boy who was buried right in front of them. But no one noticed. They found more beneath the house. Drawings, letters, recordings, 10 years of his life documented, meticulously, obsessively, and all of it centered around one thing. Jenna. Photos from school events, her graduation, even an old birthday card she never received. He'd stolen it from her mailbox and kept it, not out of malice, but obsession. The files told a haunting story. Paul hadn't just been watching. He had created a world where Jenna was the symbol of everything he lost. Innocence, love, connection. The psychologist who reviewed the materials later called it fixation trauma loop, a rare psychological pattern where a person's entire reality becomes centered around one unresolved pain and one imagined solution. In Paul's mind, Jenna had been the only person who ever saw him, even if that was never true, even if it was all in his head. And because she left, he believed she had betrayed him. That betrayal festered, rotting in silence, until it exploded into something none of them could have imagined. A few days later, Jenna sat on her mother's porch. News vans had packed up. Neighbors were back to their routines, and the world was, once again, ready to forget. But Jenna couldn't. Not this time. She opened the box they'd given her. Paul's belongings. At the very bottom was a cassette tape, unlabeled, cracked around the edges. She almost threw it away, but something told her to listen. She borrowed an old player from a thrift shop, slid the tape in, pressed play. At first, static, then his voice. Soft, younger, frightened. If anyone ever hears this, I hope it's Jenna. I didn't know how to ask for help. I thought if I could just hold on a little longer, someone would notice. But they never did. So I disappeared. Into the walls. Into the silence. But I never hated you, Jenna. I just didn't know how to be forgotten. The tape stopped. Just like that. She sat there for a long time. No tears. No anger. Just silence. Because what do you do when the villain of your story was also the victim? What do you do when the monster used to be a boy, begging to be seen? Jenna made a decision. One that would shake the entire community. She would tell the full story. All of it. Not on a podcast. Not on a TV special. But face to face. With the people who lived on that street. The ones who closed their blinds when things got uncomfortable. The ones who claimed to never notice. And with every sentence she spoke, she wasn't just telling Paul's story. She was telling theirs. The story of what happens when silence becomes a habit, when apathy becomes normal, and when a cry for help goes unanswered long enough that it turns into a scream in the basement. No one hears until it's too late. Would you have forgiven Paul if you were in Jenna's shoes? Let me know in the comments. The letter came 2 weeks later. It was handwritten, folded with trembling care, addressed to Jenna Walker. No return name, no address, just a wax seal, slightly smudged, like someone had pressed it too hard. She recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Paul's. The same cursive he used when they were kids. The same shaky loops on a birthday card he once passed across their third-grade desk. But this wasn't a child's letter. It was something else. A final confession. A revelation. A reckoning. Jenna sat on the edge of her bed, the morning sun casting a pale glow across the note. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, just breathed deeply, then opened it. If you're reading this, it means everything is over. I won't try to justify what I did. I won't pretend it wasn't wrong. But I need you to know why. The words bled through the paper like scars. Paul had written it with so much force, the pen had nearly torn the page. I was 11 when the darkness started. My father left. My mother drowned herself in silence and bottles. I stopped being a child and became invisible. No one asked how I was. No one checked. And then, you waved at me. Just once. In the hallway. You don't remember. But I do. Jenna remembered that hallway. She'd been in a rush, holding books to her chest, had smiled and waved without thinking, to a boy with his hoodie pulled tight. She never imagined that moment would plant a seed, that it would grow wild, roots twisting into obsession. I thought you were an angel. I made up a story in my head, that you were sent to rescue me. And when you left for college, it felt like my lifeline snapped. She swallowed hard. The basement became my home, a sanctuary, a prison. I built a world there, a place where I could pretend things made sense, where I could imagine you'd come back. And then it shifted. But years passed, and the more I watched you live, the more I felt abandoned, like the universe chose you and forgot me. That's when the resentment began. His words started unraveling, more frantic, more raw. I didn't want to hurt you, but I needed you to see me, just once more. The final paragraph was scrawled almost like a child's writing, uneven, shaky, barely legible. Maybe I was born broken, or maybe the world just didn't care enough to catch me when I fell. Either way, I hope this letter gives you peace. Not because I deserve it, but because you do. Paul. The last word was barely inked. A faint pressure where the pen had trembled, as if even his own name had become too heavy to carry. Jenna sat still for a long time, letter in hand, thoughts roaring like thunder in a silent room. She didn't forgive him, not fully, but she understood. And that was the beginning of healing, not just for her, but for the community. Because when she read that letter at the town meeting, people cried, not just for what happened, but for what they ignored. They cried for the silence, for the missed signs, for the boys like Paul, and the girls like Jenna, trapped in stories they never volunteered to be in. And in that moment, something shifted. The neighborhood built a community center, not in Paul's name, not in Jenna's, but in memory of every child who ever felt unseen, every broken home that wore a mask, every scream that echoed behind closed doors. They called it the listening place, because listening, true, intentional listening, could be the difference between someone being found or someone being forgotten. And that was the real story, not what Paul did, but what was never done for Paul. The community center opened on a quiet Sunday morning. Clouds hung low, almost as if they knew. No fanfare, no ribbon cutting, just a circle of folding chairs, a pot of coffee, and people who once pretended not to see each other now sitting face to face. Jenna stood at the back of the room, watching, listening. She hadn't planned to speak. She had done enough, survived enough, but something stirred in her chest, a weight that refused to stay silent. And so, when the organizer asked if anyone had a story to share, Jenna walked forward. The silence in the room wrapped around her like thick fog, not heavy with judgment, but laced with curiosity and unspoken guilt. She didn't bring the letter. She didn't need to. It was etched into her memory like scars you stop noticing but never forget. Her voice cracked when she said his name. Paul wasn't a monster. He was a mirror. The room didn't move, not even a breath. She went on. For 10 years, he lived right next door. 10. And none of us ever asked him how he was doing. We smiled. We waved. We nodded at his silence like it was polite, not a scream disguised as stillness. Some people looked down. Others stared straight at her, as if her words were unlocking something buried beneath their own memories. Jenna told them about the letter, about the basement, about the cameras, and about how he once built a fake world beneath his floorboards, just to feel in control of something. And then she paused. "He watched me live," she said softly, "while he was dying inside." No one clapped. No one had to, because her words weren't a performance. They were an awakening. From that day forward, the listening place became more than a building. It became a habit, an intention. Neighbors started checking in on one another. Teenagers found safe corners to talk. Men who never cried in public began to admit they were tired. Mothers who always wore smiles finally said they felt alone. And Jenna, she found something else too. Something she never thought she'd reclaim. Her power. Not the kind that comes from shouting, but the kind that comes from knowing your pain didn't break you. It built you. She started journaling again, sharing pieces of her story online, not for validation, but for visibility. And the comments poured in. People from Lagos, people from Karachi, people from Birmingham, Cape Town, Nairobi, and Atlanta. I felt invisible too. I knew a Paul. He was my brother. This made me cry. Please don't stop sharing. And so, she didn't. Because for every Paul out there was a Jenna still trying to make sense of the shadows. And while the basement was sealed, its memory buried, its story lived on. Not as a horror story, but as a lesson about what happens when we stop seeing people as stories waiting to be heard and start treating them as problems to avoid. About how the most broken people don't always scream. Sometimes, they just sit next door for 10 years, waiting for someone to knock. And most of all, about how healing doesn't always start with answers. Sometimes, it starts with a name, a voice, and a community finally willing to listen. But just when Jenna thought the past was behind her, a package arrived. No name, no postage, just left on her front porch. Inside, a flash drive and a note. "You haven't seen everything." Her hands trembled. Because what could possibly be left? What hadn't already been exposed? Was there someone else involved? Was Paul hiding more than just his pain? Jenna plugged it in, and what she saw changed everything. Jenna stared at the flash drive in her hand like it was radioactive. It felt heavier than it should, like it carried the weight of 10 more years. She didn't ask to relive. Her first instinct was to throw it out, to burn it, to pretend it never arrived. But curiosity is louder than fear. When you've survived darkness and lived to tell the story. She locked the door, pulled the blinds, and plugged it in. But curiosity is louder than fear. When you've survived darkness and lived to tell the story. She locked the door, pulled the blinds, and plugged it in. The folder was titled, "For Her Eyes Only." She clicked it open. Inside were 12 video files, each one labeled by date. The most recent, 2 weeks before Paul's death. The oldest, 10 years ago, exactly when he moved in. Her heart thudded in her chest. Not because she feared what she'd see, but because she feared who else might be in those videos. She clicked the oldest file. The screen flickered. Grainy footage. Basement walls. Boxes. Silence. Then, Paul. But not the version of him she remembered. Not the tired man in wrinkled clothes and faraway eyes. This Paul looked hopeful. He was adjusting the camera, smiling slightly, muttering something to himself she couldn't quite catch. Then he sat down on a wooden stool and began talking to the camera, like it was a therapist. "I just want to leave something behind, something real, so I don't disappear like I never existed." He talked for 20 minutes. About moving to the neighborhood, about wanting to start over, about how he had no family, no friends, just a box of books, a cat named Walter, and the belief that silence would protect him from being hurt again. It was raw, human, painful. Jenna's eyes welled with tears. She clicked the next file. This time, Paul was crying. "I waved at her today," he whispered, wiping his face. She smiled. First person to really smile at me in years. I wanted to tell her I noticed, but I didn't, because I'm still afraid of people. He was talking about her. Her. The moment she couldn't even remember. The one that meant nothing to her, but everything to him. She clicked the next file, then the next, each one darker than the last. His voice grew quieter, his eyes more hollow. He spoke of nightmares, of loneliness that wrapped around his bones like frost, of the neighbors who never saw him, and then, of the decision to document everything, to record the neighborhood, not for surveillance, but to remind himself that the world was still moving, even when he felt frozen. He filmed sunsets, squirrels, leaves falling in his backyard, and people, Jenna, her family, her friends, all from his window. It was disturbing, yes, but not in the way she expected. Not leering, not creepy, just desperate. A man trying to feel connected to life. By watching it pass by, Jenna sat still, breathing shallow. She hadn't even reached the last video yet, but her perception had already cracked open. Paul wasn't just the man next door. He was a ghost with a heartbeat, a presence overlooked until it turned into an echo. She clicked the final video, dated 2 weeks before his death. He sat in the basement, wearing the same clothes he was found in. No tears this time, just resignation. I know what people will say, that I was strange, unwell, maybe dangerous, but all I ever wanted was to matter. He held up something, a photo of Jenna, smiling, from years ago, in her garden. I watched the world from behind glass, but she made me believe it was still beautiful. He ended with a sentence Jenna would never forget. If someone ever finds this, tell her thank you. Tell her I remembered. The screen went black. Jenna sat in silence. Tears streamed down her face. The man everyone ignored had seen her clearly, and somehow, in the shadows of his own pain, he had left behind a tribute to her light. She closed the laptop. No one would believe her. Some might call it creepy. Some might say he crossed a line. But Jenna didn't feel fear. She felt responsibility. Paul didn't need exposure. He needed remembrance. And so, she made a choice. She posted a message on the community page. 10 years ago, a man moved in Nextdoor. Most of us never asked his name. Some of us never said hello. He's gone now, but he left behind a story, and we owe it to him to listen. But just as she was about to log off, another notification popped up. A comment on her old blog, a blog she hadn't touched in years. It read, "You're not done yet. There's another tape." Jenna's breath caught. Another tape? Where? Who knew? And then, a knock at the door. Slow, deliberate. 2 knocks, then silence. She froze, because no one had knocked like that since Paul. And when she opened the door, there was no one there. Only a small brown envelope, taped to the railing, and written in black marker. The truth goes deeper. Jenna held the envelope like it might vanish if she blinked. The handwriting was unmistakable, neat, angular, almost mechanical, the same as on the flash drive, the same as on Paul's basement journal. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single key and a note. 6 words. Behind the boiler, under the bricks. Her stomach flipped. She knew what it meant. The old boiler in Paul's basement. She'd seen it during the investigation. Rusty, massive, unmoving. But she remembered something else too. The floor near it had sounded hollow. She didn't hesitate. By dusk, she was back at Paul's house. The police had finished their investigation weeks ago. The landlord hadn't touched anything. No one wanted the place. It smelled like dust and endings. She went straight to the basement. It was exactly as she left it. Cold and quiet, like time had given up trying to pass. She crouched beside the boiler. The concrete here was cracked. Rough, uneven bricks sat loosely in the corner. She tapped them. Hollow. She pulled them out, one by one. Her fingers trembled. Dust filled her nose. And then, a wooden panel. Old. Warped. With another keyhole. The key fit perfectly. With a soft click, the panel creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase, descending into darkness. This wasn't on any blueprint. Even the police hadn't found this. A second basement. She turned on her phone flashlight. Each step felt like it pulled her out of reality and into a memory. The air grew colder, stale, not just with time, but with secrets. At the bottom, a metal door. She pushed it open. What she saw next made her knees buckle. Walls, covered in clippings, notes, photos. Every person in the neighborhood, every house, every streetlight, every face. Labeled, dated, tracked. But this wasn't obsession. It was protection. Dozens of sticky notes revealed patterns. Break-ins, missing pets, arguments, shady contractors. Police calls swept under the rug. One note read, "Why does no one else notice?" Paul hadn't just been watching. He had been documenting everything, trying to warn people, trying to protect them from something. And in the center of the room, an old camcorder, still on, still recording. Jenna pressed play on the screen. Paul appeared again. This time different. There was fear in his eyes. Real fear. "They came into the house last night. I know it. Someone moved the file. Someone's been watching me back. He turned the camera, showed scratches on the walls, marks near the vents, a shadow he couldn't explain caught on tape. I thought I was the watcher, but maybe I was the decoy. Then he leaned closer to the camera. If something happens to me, if they say it's natural, it's not. Check the tapes. All of them. Don't stop at the surface. Jenna stood frozen. She looked around again. There were dozens of boxes marked backyard archives, each one labeled with dates, covering every year he lived there. And then, a final folder sitting on a desk, separate from everything else, titled, Jenna for when you're ready. She reached for it with shaking hands. Inside, a note. Even in silence, you made me believe I wasn't invisible. That's more than anyone else ever did. If you're reading this, you're the only one who will know what I tried to stop. Below it, a list. Names, addresses, dates. But one name at the top caught her attention. Her own. Next to it, targeted, observed, involved. Jenna stepped back. What did that mean? Was she in danger? Or was Paul warning her about someone else? Suddenly, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message. You shouldn't have gone back there. And then, before she could react, the lights went out. Total darkness. Silence. And then, footsteps. Coming down the hidden stairs. Darkness wrapped around Jenna like a blanket soaked in dread. The only sound she could hear was the dull thud of her own heartbeat. And the footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Getting closer. She couldn't breathe. Her flashlight was dead. Phone, black screen. It had died seconds after the message. There was no time to think. She backed against the far wall of the second basement, arms outstretched, trying to feel for something, anything, that could be used to defend herself. A camera tripod, a metal pipe, even a book, anything. The footsteps reached the bottom stair, then stopped. She strained to hear. Nothing. Just the sound of silence threatening to crack wide open. Then a click. A flashlight flickered on, blinding her for a moment. A figure stood at the doorway, covered in black, hooded, face hidden. Jenna froze. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching, then slowly raised a hand, pointed at her, and turned off the light. Gone. Jenna's lungs finally remembered how to work. She fumbled for the matches. She'd seen on the table earlier. Paul must have used them for emergencies. She lit one. The flame shook in her trembling fingers. But she was alone again. No footsteps. No sound. Had she imagined it? She didn't wait to find out. Grabbing Paul's final folder, she climbed the hidden stairs 2 at a time and bolted out of the house. The night air outside was thick with unease. She looked over her shoulder. The house was still, dark, silent, but something told her it wasn't over. She drove home in a daze, heart pounding, hand clutched around the folder like it contained her own life. Inside her apartment, she locked every door, shoved furniture in front of the windows, and opened the folder again. This time, she read it slowly. Paul's notes were clear. He had discovered something more sinister than neighborhood drama. A pattern. People who had moved into the neighborhood and vanished. People who were replaced by others with identical names. Paul called them mirrors. He believed there was a group, a network, quietly replacing real people with copies, lookalikes, emotionless, manipulative, and Jenna had been listed as a potential target. Why? She didn't know. But Paul had observed them interacting with her, marking her behavior, testing her, and she had failed one of the tests. She remembered the strange interaction with her neighbor Martha last month. How Martha had asked her the same question twice in 2 days, as though she was checking her memory. Jenna had laughed it off then. Now she wasn't so sure. Paul had tried to expose them, but no one believed him. Now he was gone, and she was next. She couldn't sleep that night. Every shadow looked like a person. Every creak sounded like a whisper. And then, just before dawn, another message came in. No number, no sender, just one word. Run. She didn't run. Not immediately. Jenna sat frozen on her living room floor, clutching her phone like it held answers. Run. The word echoed in her skull louder than any scream. She should have listened. But instead, she reached for Paul's final item. The thing she'd seen inside the folder, but hadn't dared to touch till now. A memory card. Tiny, black, unlabeled. She slid it into her old DSLR camera, the one she hadn't touched in years. The screen flickered. There were 3 videos, all dated months apart, all titled the same. Test footage, Jenna. She felt her pulse crash. She hadn't known Paul ever recorded her. Had never seen him with a camera. Never gave permission. Her finger hovered, then tapped play. The video began with static. Then Paul's voice. Low. Tired. I'm making this in case they get me before I can explain. If you're seeing this, Jenna, I'm sorry. But I had to watch you. They were watching you too. The camera turned. And there she was. Across the street. Laughing with Martha. Handing groceries to Mr. Oba. Walking her dog. Normal. Too normal. Paul's voice continued. They mimic patterns. Daily behaviors. Facial tics. But they glitch under pressure. Ask the same question twice. Watch for micro-reactions. They can't hold confusion for long. Then the video cut. New clip. Jenna, in her own apartment, seen through a window. Drinking tea. Typing on her laptop. Paul whispered again. She passed the first 2 tests, but failed the third. That's when they marked her. Jenna's throat closed. She didn't remember a third test. The final video opened with a dark screen. Audio only. Muffled voices. Rustling. Then a voice she recognized too well. Martha. Except it wasn't her usual warm tone. It was clipped. Sharp. Unfamiliar. She's observant. That's a problem. We monitor her 1 more week. If deviation persists, we extract. Another voice. Male. Unrecognizable. She won't survive extraction. Then silence. The video ended. Jenna dropped the camera. Suddenly it all made sense. The overlapping routines. The fake warmth. The duplications Paul had called mirrors. This wasn't about Paul being crazy. This was about control. And she had been chosen as either a threat or a candidate. Maybe both. She packed a bag. Didn't brush her teeth. Didn't turn off the lights. She walked to her car like it was any other day. Smiled at a neighbor on the porch, one she didn't recognize. He smiled back. Too wide. Too perfect. She drove. Nowhere specific. Just far. She passed gas stations. Avoided highways. Took side roads. But by dusk, her car had started acting strange. The check engine light blinked. Then the steering stiffened. She pulled over near a field. No cars behind. No cars ahead. She got out. Pop. Pop. 2 soft hisses. Both rear tires. Flat. She wasn't alone. She turned. Across the road, 3 people were standing. Not moving. Just watching. No phones. No luggage. No expressions. And then, one of them stepped forward. Jenna. She ran. Into the field. Through thorns. Barefoot. Bleeding. But she didn't stop. Not even when she heard the mechanical buzz in the air. Not even when a drone hovered just feet above her head. She kept running until the world blurred. And when she finally collapsed, the ground beneath her was soft. Loose. She looked down. Freshly dug earth. A small white cross. And next to it, a weathered wooden sign. 1 word. Paul. She fell to her knees. He had known. He had known they would come for her. And he had buried the last piece of the truth here. But she wasn't the only one who had come to this field. From the edge of the trees, they emerged again. Closer now. Smiling. Perfectly. And behind them, headlights. A black van. Unmarked. No license plates. Doors opening. A voice on a speaker. Don't run. You've been chosen. And then darkness. Jenna couldn't feel her legs. She could barely see. The world spun in slow, nauseating circles as strong. Arms lifted her off the cold earth and carried her into the van. Her vision flickered. Black, then gray, then sharp white light. A door slammed. Then silence. She tried to move, but straps held her wrists, ankles, even her head in place. Something was humming softly around her, a low mechanical sound that pulsed beneath her skin like it was inside her veins. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then she realized the ceiling above her wasn't metal. It was a screen. And it was playing something. A video feed. Of her. In her apartment. Sleeping. Eating. Singing to herself in the kitchen. All from different angles. She wasn't being watched from Paul's house. She'd been watched from everywhere. Inside her home. Inside her life. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Then, a click. And a new voice spoke, calm and robotic. Subject 0147, conscious. Phase 1 observation complete. Initiating Phase 2, identity deconstruction. Jenna's breath caught. Identity deconstruction. She didn't understand. Then, the screen changed again. This time, showing documents. Her school certificates. Her passport. Her birth certificate. One by one, they disappeared. Lines of data redacted. Names erased. Then came her photos. Deleted. From cloud storage. Social media. Everywhere. It was like watching herself vanish. Like watching her own life get scrubbed in real time. She screamed. But there was no sound. Her voice was gone. She wasn't gagged. Her voice was simply missing. The machine had stolen it. Then the van moved. Not fast. Smooth. Like it floated. Outside. Through a tiny slit near her feet, she saw dark forest roads pass by. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know who they were. She just knew one thing. She didn't exist anymore. Not on paper. Not in pixels. Not even to herself. And that terrified her more than the strangers watching. Suddenly, a sharp sting pierced her neck. She winced. A syringe. Hidden from view. A cold liquid surged into her bloodstream. Instantly, her thoughts blurred. Names disappeared. Faces vanished. Her mother's smile? Gone. Her father's laugh? Nothing. Only Paul remained. His warning. His sacrifice. His voice. She gripped it tight in her mind as everything else slipped away. The van stopped. Doors opened. Blinding white light. No trees. No city. Just a concrete structure built into the side of a cliff. No signs. No markings. Only cameras. And silence. She was wheeled out like a patient. Down a tunnel. Underground again. Like Paul's basement, but bigger. Colder. A voice echoed through a hidden speaker. Welcome to the archive. Then the walls came alive. Thousands of faces. On thousands of screens. All like her. Some crying. Some smiling. Some blank. Others screaming in frozen silence. Then the voice spoke again. You've been chosen for Phase 3, integration. She wanted to fight. To scream. To run. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not until she knew what Paul had tried to stop. Not until she knew what was really under his basement. And just when she thought she couldn't take more, a face appeared on the screen in front of her. It was her, but not quite. Same hair, same eyes, same smile, but colder, mechanical, and it spoke with her voice. The one they stole. Don't worry, Jenna. I'll take it from here. And then the screen went black. Jenna's breath caught as she stared into the eyes of the woman on the screen. Her own eyes. But wrong. Hollow. Like someone had copied her soul and left the rest blank. The digital version of her blinked once, tilted its head, and smirked. Then it vanished. The hallway dimmed. The chair she was strapped to began moving again. Deeper underground. Walls grew tighter. Air colder. Everything felt like it was closing in. She tried to remember something, anything, about her life. But her mind was a foggy sea, and every memory was drowning. Until she saw him. Paul. Not in the flesh, but in a photo, pasted crudely on a file folder tucked into a passing cart pushed by someone in a white suit. It was labeled Subject 0001, decommissioned. Her pulse skipped. Paul had been the first. She wasn't the only one. There were others. Victims. Like her. Erased. Rewritten. Stored. Used. But why? She was rolled into a room. Round. Empty. Except for a single full-length mirror. And in that mirror, she saw herself again. But this time, not on a screen. Not digital. Real. Except, the woman staring back didn't look like the Jenna she remembered. Her eyes were colder. Posture straighter. Expression blank. As if something inside her had been shut off. Then the voice returned. Same calm, robotic tone. Congratulations, Jenna. Integration 61% complete. You are now a functional Echo. Identity restoration no longer possible. Echo. Was that what they called her now? Was she even still human? Her heart screamed that she was. But her reflection didn't. Then the wall behind the mirror slid open. A man stood there. Not a scientist. Not a guard. Just a regular man. In his 60s. Calm eyes. White hair. Clean suit. He looked like he could be anyone's grandfather. And he spoke. Soft. Familiar. Do you remember me? She didn't. But her body tensed. Something deep within her recognized that voice. He walked closer. No fear. No hesitation. This was never supposed to happen like this, he said. You were supposed to be activated after full calibration. You weren't ready. Paul interfered. Again. Jenna tried to speak. Nothing came out. The man sighed. Paul thought he could stop the system. He didn't understand it. None of them did. But he was right about one thing. He paused. Then leaned in, whispering. This basement. It isn't just a basement. It's a bridge. She blinked. A bridge? To what? She wanted to ask. But before she could form the The floor shook. Screams echoed from distant tunnels. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the room. The man's calm shattered. He straightened, tapped something on his wrist, and disappeared behind a mirror. Jenna's chair unlatched. Just like that, her body dropped to the ground like a rag doll. She crawled, dizzy and cold, toward the open wall. But behind her, the screen flickered on again. Her face returned. Only now, it was wearing a lab coat, talking to a camera, smiling. Subject 0147. Integration complete, the voice said. The face on the screen looked out and said, "We are all echoes now." Then the screen cracked. Lights burst, and the entire floor gave way. Jenna fell, through darkness, through memories, through her stolen identity, until she landed, on concrete, in a different place. Old, dusty, familiar, shelves lined with dusty books, a mattress, chains on the floor, and a note pinned to the wall. It was Paul's handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means you made it past the first phase. Keep going. You're not like them. You're stronger. The real basement isn't a place. It's a memory. Yours. Find it." Her hands trembled as she picked up the note. And then she heard it. A sound behind the wall. A heartbeat. Not hers. Not the machine's. But something real. Something human. She turned slowly. And then she saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them. Watching through cracks in the brick. And a whisper. "You're not the only one who woke up." The note in her hand trembled. Jenna stared at it. Then at the cracked wall. Behind it, those eyes blinked. Human, but wrong. They didn't beg for help. They didn't show fear. They only watched. Still, cold, trained. Then, from deep in the wall, a voice whispered, "You woke up too soon." Jenna stepped back, but the floor creaked. A soft hiss escaped from a vent above her head. And the lights, if they could be called that, dimmed into a low, sickly red. It felt like being inside a dying heart. The walls pulsed. The room vibrated, just slightly, like it was breathing. Then, behind the chains, she saw it. Another note, buried beneath dust and dried blood. Not Paul's handwriting this time. Sharper, angrier. They're not storing memories. They're planting them, one by one. And the worst part? You don't forget your real ones. You just stop trusting them. Jenna's head spun. Her childhood memory, the blue bicycle, her mother's perfume, her father's laugh, it came back. But now it felt fake, manufactured, scripted, like someone had written it into her life file and pressed play. She clutched her head. Images flashed. A hospital bed, electrodes on her scalp, a voice saying, "Bring subject 0147 online." Then, Paul, standing over her, whispering, "Don't trust the exits." Suddenly, boom, the wall exploded inward. Dust, screams, sparks, and out stepped, not guards, not scientists, but kids, teens, all wearing the same gray uniform, all silent, all staring at her like she was an intruder in their home. The tallest stepped forward, no older than 16, eyes like a wolf, voice like a soldier. "You're Jenna 0147? Jenna nodded slowly. The teen tilted his head. "Good. The archive has been hunting you. You're the breach. You're the reason it's unraveling." "What is it?" Jenna managed to ask. He didn't blink. "The archive," he said. "The basement. The memories. The faces. It's all one system. One consciousness. We're not trapped in a lab." He looked up. His voice dropped. "We're trapped in someone else's mind." Then, the ceiling above them cracked. Dust rained down. And above, distant, impossibly far away, a loudspeaker crackled to life. A deep, artificial voice thundered across every hallway. "Emergency override. Echo 0147 located. Initiate erase protocol." The kids moved fast. The leader grabbed Jenna's hand. "We don't have much time," he said. "If they reach your core memory, you'll lose yourself for good." And they ran, through tunnels that twisted like intestines, past rooms filled with floating images, snippets of lives not lived, dreams that never belonged to her. Screams echoed behind them. Heavy footsteps followed. Jenna's lungs burned. Her heart raced, but she kept going. And as they turned a corner, a mirror stood at the end of the hallway. Not cracked, not dusty, pristine, glowing. And in that mirror, Jenna saw herself. Not broken, not erased, but whole. The version of her that existed before the archive touched her mind. The girl before the memory wipe. Before Paul. Before the basement. The boy beside her whispered, "That's your core. Touch it, and you'll remember everything. But it'll cost you." Jenna's fingers trembled. She reached forward, and just before her hand met the glass, a gunshot rang out, and the mirror shattered. The mirror lay in pieces. Jenna's hand trembled above the shattered glass. The bullet had come from the shadows. She turned and saw Paul, older, paler, almost translucent, but very much alive. His eyes no longer held that tired neighborly kindness. No, now they were empty, mechanical. He stepped forward, the gun still raised, but no longer aimed. "You almost made it out," he said softly, "but you touched too much. Saw too far." The children who had helped her stood frozen behind her, as if some invisible force pinned them to the floor. "Who am I?" Jenna demanded. Paul stared at her for a long moment, and then said, "You were my wife once. Before the accident. Before I lost you. But I couldn't let go. So I did the only thing a desperate man with power and madness could do. I rebuilt you. From memories. From tech. From fragments. Piece by piece. Over and over again. This house. This basement. They've been cycling you for years. Resetting the pain. Resetting your story." Jenna shook her head. "No. I had real memories. My mother. My childhood." Paul's face twisted with grief. "They were never yours. They were stitched together to calm you. To keep you whole. But the truth always creeps back in." Behind him, the walls began to pulse again. The lights blinked. A loud, pulsing siren filled the space. The archive was collapsing. The system couldn't hold the truth anymore. Paul's voice cracked. "I loved you, Jenna. I still do. But love can't justify playing God. I thought I was saving you. But all I did was trap you." Tears welled in Jenna's eyes. Or were they tears? She didn't know if her body was even real. But something inside her, soul or code, was breaking. "Let me go," she whispered. Paul nodded, slowly. "I know. You deserve peace." He turned and walked into the control panel. His hand hovered over a red button. He looked back at her one final time. "I'm sorry I kept you here, but I'm grateful I got to say goodbye. One last time." And with that, he pressed it. A violent wind rushed through the corridor. The walls cracked open. The memories burst like fireworks. Fragments of her, of him, of what they used to be. And then, silence. Jenna opened her eyes. Sunlight. Real sunlight. Not fluorescent basement light. She stood alone in an open field. No fences. No concrete. No wires. Just sky. Wind. Grass. She could feel again. Smell again. A gentle breeze carried the scent of freedom. No voices in her head. No false childhoods. Just herself. Whatever that meant now. She sat down, placed her hand on the earth, and let the warmth seep in. And then she smiled. Because for the first time, she wasn't someone else's idea of her. She was just Jenna. Broken. Healed. Free. Sometimes the people who love us the most can also hurt us the deepest. Especially when they try to rewrite who we are, instead of accepting who we've become. Identity is not something to be built by others. It's a journey we must claim, piece by piece, on our own terms. Respect is not control. Love is not possession. And karma always finds its way back. What would you do if everything you remembered turned out to be a lie? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Drop the country you're watching from. Subscribe for more true stories. And remember, never ignore what's happening next door. You never know what secrets are hidden beneath.